Hi, it's Tom Maoli, serial entrepreneur, and we're back high above the towers in Madison Square Garden. I have Jim Totten here again. Jim, how you doing?
Hi, Tom. How are you tonight?
Good. And interesting time. We have the Olympics going on. It's an amazing,
right?
It's an amazing time. We have a lot of things going on. And, week after week, the show just keeps getting better and better.
Absolutely.
Last week we had Veronica Maoli, a student at High Point University, studying to be an entrepreneur. And this major in college is now in vogue, which is amazing, is that kids now want to be entrepreneurs. As I've said last week, I said, historically, you look back when I was a kid, kids wanted to be rock stars. And then before that, it was movie stars. And now everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. It's in vogue. It's unbelievable. And, I'll talk 2 seconds about the show, and then we have our special guest that we're going to talk about tonight. Tonight we have the creme de la creme. We have the
Fantastic.
top. Yeah, it's amazing. It's unbelievable. But we're going to talk about the show. The show just keeps getting better and better. You go from Amazing Kreskin to Bobby Collins, on and on and on, and Arshita Furman, and the list just keeps getting
Sheffield.
Gary Sheffield, exactly. And the lineup gets incredible and just gets better. And we talk about this week after week. And what's the purpose of the show? The purpose of the show is to get people from out behind the desk, out of the cubicles, out of corporate America. They're frustrated. They're sitting there. They have ideas. They want to go out and be entrepreneurs. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur deep down inside, and they're all trying to figure out how to do it. And that's the purpose of the show, is to teach people how to do it. How do you finance your business? How do you get out there and do it? How do you take the risk? What's the right risk? What's the wrong risk? What's the right timing? What's the wrong timing? There's so many questions out there that people just have that, I get emails all week long and text messages, and people are wanting to now come see me at my office. And, it's absolutely, I find it interesting because people that I looked up to and, I would go to for advice are now coming to me for advice. So, I think it's interesting. Clearly it's a development process of the show and where things are going.
And Tom, actually, Veronica was quite interesting last week, bringing a younger perspective to it. Like you stated a few times when you were out there, starting out, there wasn't email, there wasn't texting, all those type of things.
No, we're living
Veronica brought up about the social media world.
We're living in a whole new world today of
Right.
technology. It's unbelievable. But tonight, on Go Big or Go Home, 770 WABC. The phone lines are open. It's 1-800-848-9222. If you have a question about business, starting a business, financing a business, call in. Tonight, we have the creme de la creme of guests. This is the man. This is the man that you want to go to. This is the man that I would go to, and it is Jason Feifer, the editor-in-chief of the world-famous Entrepreneur magazine. Now, it doesn't get better than that. It absolutely, it's unbelievable. It doesn't get absolutely doesn't get better than that. And I was featured in the November 2017 issue.
Great article.
Very proud of that. And we're going to bring Jason on the line because there's going to be a lot of questions for Jason. Jason, are you there?
I am. Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. Let me apologize in advance. I've got a nasty cold, so I sound like crap. But I'm gonna muscle through here.
That's okay. That's
Hi,
okay. Yeah. Thanks for calling in, and thanks for giving us your time, because clearly you are the go-to guy when it comes to entrepreneur. My daughter is studying to be an entrepreneur down at High Point University in North Carolina, and she was on the show last week. And I go down there, and it's funny because I walk through the dorms, and guess what's sitting on the cocktail tables in the dorms? Your magazine.
There you go.
I hope it is.
Absolutely. No, it's amazing. And they're passing this thing out, and it's unreal. And, I watch people read your magazine, and I have to tell you this because, and we'll get into some questions shortly, but I watch it, and, I read it, obviously, but I look at it and I read it, and I'm an entrepreneur, and it's only because I want to see what other entrepreneurs are doing and other people in the industry are doing. But I watch people that want to be entrepreneurs and read your magazine, and, they got their pens out, and they're underlining, and they're tagging, and they're highlighting. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So clearly you're doing a great job. Clearly you're getting to the listeners, and you're getting in the heads of the listeners, which is so important, of the readers. It's so important. And again, I really, really appreciate you coming on and time. But I have a couple of questions. I actually have a lot of questions, but a couple of the questions that I want to just talk to you about are obviously, and I want to get this question out of the way because somebody's bound to call in and ask this question. We're sitting here today in a stock market correction, right? We have a stock market correction. The stock market has clearly corrected. It went straight up. We're in a major correction. Everybody's on pins and needles as to what's going to happen tomorrow morning when the stock market opens. Clearly that affects entrepreneurs. It affects the psyche of business people and investors and people that are buying franchises and businesses and starting businesses. What do you think about the market?
Well, yeah, it's a great point. There are so many different ways to look at it. There are people who tell you, listen, the stock market is not the economy. Do not confuse the two. And that if we're a correction, then that is not such a bad thing. It's particularly, you talk about your kid studying to be an entrepreneur. You look at young people, and you talk to stock market experts, and they'll tell you, listen, young people should be rooting for the stock market to go down, because if the stock market just goes up, 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 it's expensive to get into, and it leaves out an entire generation of people who couldn't buy in the way that people 20 years could buy in. So I don't advise that readers or entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs sit there with on pins and needles and watch the stock market and take cues from the stock market about what they should or shouldn't do. I think that you need to look at the opportunities in front of you. You need to evaluate your own ideas and how it fits with your own marketplace and go forward from there. Don't let ups and downs in the stock market scare you away from chasing your dream.
I agree. You know what? You're right on the money. We talked about this last week, and that's where it comes into desire. And it's interesting because I know you have you were featured on a podcast, and it's interesting because one of the topics of that podcast, and you talk about all the time in your magazine, is embrace your setbacks. Let's talk about that, because obviously setbacks are part of it. I asked my daughter last week when she was on the phone, Veronica Maoli, and I asked her, I said, how do you deal with setbacks? And, she had an interesting answer, is that it creates more opportunity.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And I find that the entrepreneurs that are the most embracing of their setbacks are the ones that get ahead. And there are so many reasons for that. I'll give you a few of them. Number one is that people who you work with want to hear your setbacks. They don't trust you if you don't acknowledge that some things have gone wrong, because anybody in business, any entrepreneur, knows that things go wrong. They know that. So if all you do is talk about how you're killing it and how everything is great, they think you're full of it. And what they want to do is they want to work with people who have a realistic viewpoint of the world that they're in and the challenges that they're up against, because those are the kinds of people who won't fold when things get hard. Those are the kinds of people who will embrace the challenges and say, okay, I failed at this idea. Now it's time to pivot to the next one. And the thing that I just press this message all the time, which is that you can own your setbacks. You can own your failings. You do not wear them on your on your body like clothing. People don't see them. People can't make their own assumptions about them. They only see what it is that you show them. And so if you have had setbacks in your life, what you need to do is think about how you present your own story in a way that moves you forward. And everybody knows, for example, the hero's journey. If you've seen a movie, if you've read a book, if you've watched a TV show ever in your life, you've seen the hero's journey. Somebody sets out to do something, they have a setback, they overcome it. Everybody loves that story. So if you tell your version of that story, if you are open about it, but also mindful of it, if you tell that version of your story, people are attracted to you and they want to work with you.
Totally. And you're on the money. It's amazing because, one of the greatest movies of all time is Rocky, right? And you look at when he was down on the mat, right? Rocky's down and he's getting beat up, and then all of a sudden he comes back. And people love that comeback. And if you're right on the money. And, listen, I love the way you think. You think like an entrepreneur. Clearly, that's why you're the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. Fantastic. We're going to take a commercial break, and we're going to get back. Just hang on, please, and we have some more questions for you. Jason Feifer, editor-in-chief, Entrepreneur Magazine. When we come back, the phone lines are open. It's 1-800-848-9222. We'll be back in a moment.
And we're back high above the towers of Madison Square Garden. We are back with real estate and automotive, business and finance serial entrepreneur, Mr. Go Big or Go Home himself, Mr. Tom Maoli. Tom, back to you.
Thanks, Jim. And we're back, and we have a special guest on the phone tonight, and it is Jason Feifer, chief editor and chief in world famous Entrepreneur magazine, and it's just it's absolutely amazing. And the phone lines are ringing, the phone lines are open, and we have amazing questions. I mean, who else? The man. He's the man. And, when it comes to entrepreneurs, he's the man. He's been, his publications are absolutely amazing. And Jason, are you there?
I am indeed.
Great. Appreciate your time. And again, we're going to continue with the questions, but, because people want to hear about this. But, talk to me about obviously we have a new administration in a year now, right, in the White House, and they're clearly business friendly, and they clearly like entrepreneurs. And, I don't want to get into politics and who's right, who's wrong, who does the right thing, but they're clearly business friendly here. We finally have a commander in chief who understands what entrepreneurs do, right, because he's an entrepreneur. We have now the head of the SBA, Linda McMahon, who is an entrepreneur herself, right? Chairman and former president of the World Wrestling Federation, the WWE. Love Linda. Yeah, absolutely. Love Linda, personal friend of mine. And, what do you think about the administration and how this helps entrepreneurs who are looking to start?
Well, I really don't like to predict, nor do I wade, to be honest, heavily into politics in this magazine, because it's a really apolitical magazine. But I would say that the polls show that small business people are very encouraged by the administration. I think that with anything in politics, the only way to really know how anything impacted anything is to see it in hindsight. So it'll be really interesting in a couple of years to look back on this moment and see if, for example, things like the Republican tax plan's prediction that lowering taxes significantly will indeed drive investment into business actually pays off. I mean, the debate leading into that was Republicans saying that it would versus many economists and Democrats saying that it wouldn't. And, the interesting thing about times like this is that we get to see how the experiment plays out. They did it. Now we're going to see how the reality is, and we'll learn from that going forward. So, I think that's pretty cool.
Great answer. I think you're right on the money again. But playing into that whole theme, right? I'm not talking about politics, because I don't like to talk about politics on my show either. We're politics neutral. But clearly, we're going into it. We had a stock market. I mean, we had a bull market. Right now, we're in a little bit of a correction. Hopefully, it's not a crash. I believe it's a correction. I think the market will recover tomorrow. That's just my opinion. But we're now looking at a Fed that is maybe forced to raise rates a couple times to stabilize inflation, which ultimately may hurt the consumer, but it does have effect on business, especially small business. When you have small businesses and entrepreneurs who are squeezing nickels and watching their dollars, and every dollar that they have that has to go back to interest or to the bank, it doesn't allow them to market and expand their businesses. Where do you think interest rates go, and how do you think that affects the entrepreneur?
It's a really great question. I mean, I think that's if I knew the answer to that, then I would be doing something else.
Absolutely.
Because I just, I couldn't predict it. But what I got to tell you though, what's so interesting about talking to entrepreneurs and going to entrepreneurship conferences and spending time with all these people is that they really do not let outside forces like this dictate what they do. I mean, I follow the market like anybody else. I follow the kinds of conversations that, you're talking about here. But then I go out and I meet with these people, and they're not talking about it. They're talking about their own actions, and they're talking about, figuring out how to grow their own businesses, and they're going to do it regardless of what the interest rate change is. I think that, like you said, any additional dollars that can be in an entrepreneur's pocket, if it's a wise entrepreneur, is going to be invested into the business in a smart way and is going to be focused on growth. And the greatest entrepreneurs are constantly thinking about how they can take money that they've earned or money that they can free up and put it back into their business. It's the reason why Jeff Bezos has built Amazon into what it is, because he continually reinvested in the business. And certainly if you can adjust policies so that more money is available for those entrepreneurs, then they're going to do better. I mean, I guess that's the bottom line.
Yeah, talk about an entrepreneur with a vision, right? Amazon.com, right? I mean, here's a guy who started with a vision. When he started, everyone said, you're crazy, it'll never work. Losing money pouring out from every door, back door. People didn't even want to invest in the company anymore. And look at where it's at today.
Yeah, the greatest thing to understand and appreciate and I think mimic about Jeff Bezos is his long-term thinking. That is not somebody who gets frightened by short-term ups and downs. He is not thinking about how to please investors on a day-to-day basis. He is only focused on long-term, and you can see that the guy clearly has a 10, 20, 50-step long-term plan. And that is the only thing that he cares about. And that's why for many, many years, every dollar that Amazon would make gets plowed back into building Amazon. And it's the reason it's as dominant as it is. And then you look at its competitors, and they're all thinking short-term, and you can see clearly why Jeff Bezos is ahead.
Right. And he clearly was looking at his business plan and not his profits because obviously as an entrepreneur, profits are important. You want to make money. But if you have a business plan and you have a passion and a vision, the profits kind of go, it sounds crazy, but the profits kind of go to the side because you want to make, that eventually you're going to turn the corner and eventually you're going to make money. You could see it. You could see the writing on the wall. You already have your plan. You know where you're going.
Yeah, that's right. And he understands that you got to keep moving, right? If all this guy if his only ambition was to build an online bookstore, he would have built it, it would have done okay, and somebody would have come along and done it better, and that would have been the end of it. But instead, he is constantly moving. And that is so fascinating because you can see how, we go back to what we were talking about in the first segment about embracing your failures. So he goes from e-commerce giant into hardware. He launches the Fire phone. It's an absolute failure.
I absolutely remember when he launched that. I was in the logistics business serving Cisco and Motorola and Global Logistics and Critical Spare Parts, another company that I built from scratch and sold. But I remember when he started that. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people would have thought when that thing crashed and burned that Jeff Bezos would have said, okay, maybe I'm just an e-commerce company and I'm an e-commerce guy and that's it. But no, that is absolutely not what happened. He just took stock, he learned from the failure, and he moved on. And then he launched, in fact, a series of hardware with the Alexa that's unbelievable. I mean, I talk to it every day in my living room now. And that guy he's shifting and he's thinking. And I think, the really key thing to know about Jeff Bezos is that it's not like he had one specific path and he followed it. He has adjusted along the way. And the most important thing that entrepreneurs need to know is that you will run into failures along the way and you will need to adjust your game plan. And the most important thing is to not know what your goal is. It's to just be flexible in getting around.
I always say one of my key attributes, and I say this and I try and teach entrepreneurs, when I speak at colleges and I try and talk to these young kids that are coming up that want to be entrepreneurs, and I tell them one of the most important things is not only risk taking, is not only following your dream, but it's be nimble. You got to be nimble. You got to see things coming. You got to look at markets, and that's, by the way, that's why your magazine is so important. It's so important to read your magazine because any entrepreneur out there should be reading your magazine. It should be the Bible. It really tells it all. It tells what's going on in the marketplace. It tells where industry's going. It tells where businesses are going. It's a great indicator and a great tool. It's really important. But, nimble is important. You got to be able to change. You got to be able to come back to I use this analogy all the time it's like a football game. We all watched the Super Bowl last week, and just if you get tackled, it doesn't mean the game's over. You go back to the huddle, you regroup, you dust yourself off, you get a new play, and you go out there and you try and get the touchdown.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a big believer in stories influencing people, obviously, as a guy who's running a magazine. And I think that we need to see the right kinds of stories to encourage us. For that reason, I don't like success stories. I think success stories don't tell you anything. They don't teach you anything. What I like is problem-solving stories, where you learn how somebody had that setback and they overcome it. That is what the magazine is about. I only tell problem-solving stories. I am looking for the people to tell me, hey, I completely screwed this up. The entire thing nearly collapsed, and then here is how I overcame it. Because when you surround yourself with problem-solving stories, and that could be in real life too, you surround yourself with people who are willing to share those kinds of stories, you calibrate your own mind to great thinking. You start thinking in the ways in which you are flexible and nimble, as you said, and that is the only way that you get to success.
Absolutely. No, hands down, hands down. You know, we're talking about, you know, the magazine and how important it is. What do you, obviously I hear your passion when you start talking about entrepreneurs and Amazon and you see what he did. I could hear it. I mean, you sound like me, because that's how I talk. And people say to me, you know, you're so passionate, you got to calm down a little bit. I get so excited about when somebody takes something from nothing and creates it and makes those changes and sees it along the way and takes the risks. You know, what do you see? What, obviously you interview and a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of stories come across your desk. What is it that drives you in the magazine, and what do you see? What gets you excited? And what recommendations would you give to an entrepreneur who's trying to start? You know, where should he focus?
Yeah, boy. Well, those are that's a lot. I could talk about all that whole question all day. I'll try to distill it down as simply as possible. I think that when somebody is starting, the very first thing that you need to do is just put something out into the world. I think that the thing that kills ideas is analysis paralysis, where you just sit on the sidelines and you say, I got to make this thing perfect. I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's ready.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I don't remember how many weeks ago it was, but we had Gary Sheffield on here on the show, and we talked about him about a month ago, and we talked to him about it. Obviously, a baseball player turned entrepreneur, and you know, we called it 1 foot on the base. I call it 1 foot on the base. A lot of people take 1 foot off the base. They want to steal the base. They want to go to second. They want to get to the next level, but they keep 1 foot on the base because it's safe. You got to go for it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I really like that visual there. Yeah, you have to go for it. And you know what? It's okay if the thing that you launch sucks at first. It's okay. In fact, you know, Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn, has this nice phrase. He says that if you aren't embarrassed by your first product, then you launched it too late. Like, you should be launching things that you will ultimately be embarrassed by, because the point of it is just to get it out into the world. And then once people react to it, once it's up against the, you know, sandstorm of the world, that is when it becomes better. But you will never, ever get to that point if you just sit on the sidelines and never put it out there.
Well, it's interesting because I say no makes me go. I love when people say it's going to fail. I don't like that idea. It's not going to work. We're going to take a commercial break. We have Jason Feifer, editor-in-chief of the world-famous Entrepreneur magazine. We'll be back in a few. I have more questions. I want to continue on that question because it's so important to me. Like I said, no makes me go. There's nothing that's going to stop me. When I know when someone tells me that it's not going to work, it's more that I want to do it and I want to go after it. We'll be back in a few minutes with Jason Feifer.
And we are back with the Go Big or Go Home show with Tom Maoli. This segment is brought to you by Celebrity Motorcars of New Jersey, the largest luxury car dealer in the Northeast, with Lexus of Route 10 in Whippany, BMW of Springfield, Mercedes-Benz of Goldens Bridge, New York, Maserati of Morris County and Bergen County, and Alfa Romeo of Morris County as well. Tom, back to you.
And we're back, Jim. Thank you. Okay. And we have, what a show tonight. We have Jason Feifer, the editor-in-chief of the famous Entrepreneur magazine. Jason, we're back. We left off with a question, and I want to just get back into it a little bit. You know, we talked. It was a long question. We talked about what advice. Like, obviously, you get excited, like I am. You know, when I get around an entrepreneur or somebody who has an idea or somebody who's passionate about it, what advice would you give to, you know, like my daughter who's in college and she's studying to be an entrepreneur? Any advice for the young students?
Yeah, well, so let me say particularly for young people and students in particular, I think that students don't quite appreciate the degree to which everybody wants to help them. You know, if you put yourself out there, if you reach out to somebody in an industry that you're interested in or a company that you're interested in, you say, hey, I'm a student, I'm an aspiring entrepreneur, I would really love to learn from you. Could I swing by? Could I take you out to coffee? People will say yes. youth is an unbelievable advantage.
Oh no, it's amazing. I have so many mentors, and people say to me, "Well, you're so successful." And you know what? I have so many mentors. I have so many people that I could pick up the phone and call, networking. You know, older people that have been in business, that have built companies and sold them, and you know, those people are so important because they've been through it. They've been through the trials and tribulations. They've solved problems.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, actually, and if we can talk for a second, because that word right there is a really important one, mentors. I mean, it's very important to have.
If you could just take a breath for 1 second, because you're like me, you're passionate about it. But we have somebody on the line. I have Mike from Rockland who has a question for you. He's been hanging on, and I don't want to lose him. Mike, are you there?
I'm here, and I just want to say I've been listening to the show week over week. It sounds great, and I think it's a perfect show for me as I can relate perfectly to the dialogue from tonight. You know, I'm a young entrepreneur looking to put my stake in the ground, and I just kind of called in when I heard you guys talking about some advice to give, you know, fledgling entrepreneurs. So any kind of advice, I understand, you know, asking for help and, you know, having your mentors, but, you know, Mr. Feifer, I read the magazine all the time. I'm a fan of your work, Tom. I love what you guys do. Any advice you can give a young 30-year-old entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, I think that, I think I'm stammering because I realize I don't know anything about the thing that you're doing. So what my offering here is kind of broad, but I would, you know, listen. The very first thing that any entrepreneur needs to know about a particular business that they're building is product market fit. Are you building something that people need, that people really want? Are you solving a problem for people? And I think you need to go out and you need to figure that out. And the way to do that is not to ask your friends. Please do not rely upon the people who are not going to be honest with you, because, you know, your friends and your family, they want to be nice to you. And so I think, you know, one of the greatest things that I ever heard was this woman who was launching, it's a butter dish. It's a whole long story, but basically she wanted to figure out if people wanted this new kind of butter dish. You know what she did? She went to airports and she walked around and she claimed that she was just a hired surveyor, and she was asking strangers about whether or not they wanted to buy this butter dish. And she got real advice, and that real advice really helped her. So I would say go out there, get in front of strangers, and learn from them. See if what you are building is something that they need.
Jason, you know, world famous philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, if you want to be successful, find a need and fill it.
That's right. That's all we're doing as entrepreneurs. We're finding needs and filling it. And so you have to know if your idea is truly filling a need. You know, I was just at CES, you know, Consumer Electronics Show out in Vegas. And I got to say, I walked around and I saw a bazillion companies making robots and AI stuff and whatever. And I felt like 5% of this is fulfilling a need, and the rest is all just, you know, somebody's wacky dream. And it's cool. I love wacky dreams, but I really wish that people would start by identifying whether or not the thing that they're building is something that people want. Because, boy, that will save you a lot of heartache.
You know, speaking of that, I spoke, you know, last week with Veronica Maoli, my daughter, on the phone, entrepreneur student at High Point University, and I asked her a very interesting question, which always, to me as an entrepreneur, I've been in business for 35 years, you know, and I've bought, sold companies, built real estate developments, did real estate deals, did financing banks, worked with Wall Street, you know, so I've had a lot of experience. And one of the things that I find different are business cycles. And this is one of the questions that I want to ask you tonight. Obviously, as the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, you see the cycles, you see what's going on, you see where the world is going. We have a world today where, you know, and I try and look at history too, because, you know, people say, why am I studying history? You know, you talk to kids in school and they say, why am I studying history? You know, it's not really about Alexander Hamilton. It's really about the fact that history repeats itself, and you want to learn from those mistakes that people made in history. So I look at history, and, you know, when my grandfather came from here, his business cycle, the way I see it, and obviously I was a young kid, but I see his business cycle. He was an entrepreneur also, came over through Ellis Island, but, you know, his business cycles were 25, 30 years. Business cycles didn't change. You know, in my lifetime, business cycles were 10 years, 12 years, you know, 7 years. Real estate cycles were 7 years. Now they're months. You start something because of technology. It's out there. People know about it. They already know what you're doing. They're already trying to repeat it. They're trying to, you know, copy you. You look at Uber and all of a sudden you got Lyft, right? You know, so tell me, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, that's really scary. I mean, boy, wasn't it easier back then in some way to launch a business because you knew that the business cycle was a lot longer. But let me tell you what we have as an advantage right now, because the thing is, you're absolutely right that we should learn from history, and history repeats. But at the same time, there are always pluses and minuses. And the plus of back then was that you could build a business and it could basically be the same for an entire generation. The downside was that it was really hard to launch a business. Today, yeah, everything moves really fast, but one of the reasons it's moving really fast is because of constantly evolving technology. And constantly evolving technology is the reason why people can launch businesses today. You have so many tools at your disposal. So many tools, tools like Kickstarter to help you fund, tools that can help you plan and program your marketing, Shopify so that you can launch an online store. I think that taking a survey of what tools are available to you can really lower the temperature in some ways, because you can see that some of the things that were so hard to do a generation ago are now extremely easy, and that makes you a more nimble entrepreneur so long as you are willing to be constantly on top of it.
Right. And, I agree. I totally agree. It's the scary part of it is you just got to be careful about what you put out online and what you don't put out online, and how you keep your trade secrets, tight and so that no one else is copying you. You want to get out. It's first to market the way I see it. You look at Amazon, you look at Uber, it's first to market that really captures it and controls the marketplace. We're going to take a commercial break. We're going to be back with Jason Feifer, editor-in-chief of the world famous Entrepreneur magazine. Phone lines are open. It's 1-800-848-9222. Jason, if you could just hang on, we have a few more questions. We'll be back in a few.
And we're back high above the towers of Madison Square Garden. We're back with real estate and automotive, business and finance serial entrepreneur, Mr. Go Big or Go Home himself, Tom Maoli. Tom, back to you.
Jim, thank you. And we have special guest Jason Feifer, editor-in-chief, world-famous Entrepreneur magazine. Jason, thank you for your time. Take a minute and tell the listeners about Problem Solvers, your podcast.
Thanks for teeing that up for me. So I've got this podcast called Problem Solvers. Just go, iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, search for Problem Solvers. So the idea is that every week I talk to an entrepreneur about how they solved an unexpected problem in their business. And it's 15 minutes. It gets really right to the heart of it. What went wrong and how did you fix it? And I find it, we've been talking about this basically all hour, but it's just so important to hear how other people went through challenges, because you will always run into things that you couldn't have possibly anticipated. And the whether you succeed or not comes down to how well you adjust to those problems. So I think the last one, if I'm correct, was about Poppin, which is a furniture company, and they had started as a consumer-facing company. They thought that they would be selling furniture to consumers, but eventually, and so they built their entire marketing plan, their entire product design plan around consumers, and then they started looking at the data, and they realized, oh my God, we're not a consumer company. We're a B2B. We're selling to businesses.
We're selling to businesses.
And that means that we got to change everything. We got to change, we got to change our entire supply chain. We got to change the kinds of marketing that we do and the kinds of products that we're making. They had to decide whether or not to lean into this completely new arena that was scary and new, but clearly the direction that their company needed to go, or not. And if they were going to do it, how? So that's Problem Solvers.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's great. It's a great podcast. Everyone should be listening to it. Any entrepreneur should take a few minutes and listen to it, because learning how to solve problems is key. It saves tons. I can't even tell you how much money it saves when I can pick up the phone and I can call someone who I call my go-to guy, who I know can help me solve my problem, because I'm sitting there pulling my hair out, trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes you just can't figure it out because you haven't been there. You haven't experienced that bump in the road.
Tom, one thing. Jason, this is Jim. Quick question for you. What do you find your average reader is? What type of person? The startup person or somebody that's in the middle of their business?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty broad range. I would say that any magazine like ours is going to be attracting predominantly beginners,
right?
Because those are the folks who I think have less of a network of actual other people to go to, and
right,
so they
true.
turn to something like a magazine. But the great thing about a magazine like this is that I really do hear from folks at every level of experience. I know that there are founders of really giant companies who are reading this thing and take inspiration from it. And so it's pretty great. But I mean, predominantly you're talking about either beginners or folks who are have a small business and they're really trying to figure out how to grow it.
Great.
So Jason, question for you, because this is a question that people email me. They call me. They want to come and talk to me. They have this question that and it's entrepreneurs. It's people that are in business. And I go to cocktail parties, and people are there and they say, "When do you sell your baby?" Yeah,
it's a really great question. It's a really hard question, and there is absolutely no one right answer to this. I mean, I'd be curious, what you think, in being in it. I think that there are people, if you look at some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time, you see people who should have sold, like Groupon, and people who...
Great example. Great. They're talking about a company that was on fire. Fire. Right. They wrote it out. They thought they had they thought they had so much more juice in the apple, and they just fell off the face of the earth.
That guy Andrew, I can't remember his last name, but the founder of that thing, he turned down something like $1 billion, and I'm sure he wishes he sold. But then, everybody told Mark Zuckerberg that he was stupid for not selling Facebook, and that worked out pretty well for him not selling. I think that you need to decide for yourself in some ways whether or not you want to get out or you are really in it for the long haul. Because here's the thing. If you're in it for the long haul, at some point you have to kill your company and start over. And I don't mean actually closing your company, but I mean that the company that you're running today cannot look like the company in 10 years. You're going to have to change it over and over. You're going to have to abandon things that used to work. It's going to be hard. And if you're up for that, and if you're up for the evolution of that, then man, go for it. But if you're not, and you've hit upon something and somebody wants to buy, then go cash out. It's all up to you.
Well, my answer to that is go with your gut. I always say go with your gut. Where you think this business can go. Where you think the evolution of what you've started can go, and what's right for you. You got to go with your gut. I always say one thing, though, is no one ever went broke by taking a profit.
Yeah, that is true.
Right?
That is true.
Yeah. So listen, that would be my answer. I think you have to go with your gut. And Jason, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on. Go big or go home. You were a wealth of knowledge and information. Everybody, again, should be listening to Jason's podcast, Problem Solvers. Go to iTunes and get it. Get Entrepreneur Magazine. If you want to be an entrepreneur, or if you are an entrepreneur, you better be reading it. If you want to be an entrepreneur, get it. Start reading it. It's an amazing magazine. Jason, great job. Very proud to have you on the show. Thanks for your time. We're going to talk about next week a little bit. We have a special guest coming on next week, and I want to leave everybody with some advice, that I leave every week. And I always say that you got to go with your gut. You got to take the leap of faith that tells you your gut is right. What's right. You're sitting there in corporate America. You want to get out from behind the desk. You got to do it. And you can't hit the ball unless you swing the bat. Next week we're going to have Andy McDonald, who's a world famous skateboarder on, defied all odds, became a world championship skateboarder. And you say, how is that an entrepreneur? You know what? He went after his dreams. We're going to talk about how these people go after their dreams and they succeed and they make a living at it. And that's an entrepreneur. He's an entrepreneur. So did he build a business? No, but he went after his dreams. He stepped aside, put everything else aside, and went after his dream and earned a living at it. That's an entrepreneur and took risk. That's what it's about. Again, you can't hit the ball unless you swing the bat. I wish everyone out there the greatest success in the world. Stand by your beliefs, maintain your morals and values, and never give up on your ideals or your dreams. Never give up on your dreams. And always remember, winners never quit, quitters never win. It's Tom Maoli. Go big or go home. We'll see you next Sunday night, 7 p.m.